Welcome to this new episode of the Photo Collective podcast. So immediately I'll go towards the words for the word hunt, the Photo Collective word hunt that's been going since 2005. It's been a long time. So every month the system on the website randomly picks 3 words, and this month is going to be series, tree, singular, statement, singular. In French, for those who speak French, it's série, arbre, déclaration. And yeah, those words are simply, I think, interesting pretexts to go hunt photos that would relate to them, either alone or in group. You can do it outside, you can do it in a studio, whatever. It's just a pretext to take pictures and exercise and have fun, hopefully, too. So, and once you've taken pictures for one or more than one of those words, you can post them online in social networks with the hashtag on front of it. You can also use the hashtag PCLLTV for Photo Collective, or the hashtag Photo Collective, but that's going to be a little bit mixed up with many other thematics that use the Photo Collective hashtag. Also, the hashtag PCLLTV 0923 can be of interest if you want to focus on the months. Anyways, choose the one that fits you best, and yeah, go enjoy taking photographs with those keywords. As for every first week of the month, I'm going to do a recap. So basically, I'm going to go back in the months preceding and actually talk about the YouTube playlists. And also the French version of the podcast, and do a small recap for those who are interested. So basically, there's a French version of the podcast where the invitees are different and the thematics obviously different too. Sometimes I synchronize, but most of the time it's quite different. And last week, the first week in French was about language in photography, how important it is, in my opinion, to be careful about the language you use to create your photographic project. And that was initiated because of my product podcast, photo project that I made for this podcast, where I tried to speak about inspiration. And I got stuck between choosing French or English to build it, and I realized how different the end result can be depending on how you sync your project. And that probably stands for any language. So that was the first episode of the podcast in French. If you go on the YouTube channel, those French versions have usually the translated captions. So that's why I also try to integrate them here. The second week was the first time I had the return of an invitee. So for the dialogues, Pierre-Edouard Monnier is a Swiss photographer from the state of Vaud, the French part of Switzerland, and he talks about his work for a music festival to come. Well, now it's past, but at the time it was following the interview, and he talks about how he prepares for concert photography and why he does it, why he likes it. And that was an interview I did in his studio. The week after, that's again a thematic, not a dialogue, and I talk about why it's interesting to go to a photo festival. Either you be a professional, a semi-pro, or a casual photographer with no other expectation about photography, you simply like it. Why it's interesting, and I give examples with the Festival of Arles in south of France and the International Photo Festival Alton in central Switzerland. And the last week was a super interesting dialogue with Claude Doucet, a photographer that lives in the Valais state of Switzerland. That's a mostly French-speaking state in Switzerland. And he talks about his relationship to photography. He was an illustrator, how slowly or more subtly photographing took over in his life. And very interesting, in my opinion, dialogue where he talks about the reasons of his photography. As for the English podcast, you probably already have seen the invitees because you're listening to this one. But first week of last month was Serun Noen, this fantastic photographer, Icelandic photographer that lives in Sweden, that does those incredible portraits, landscapes, and interior architecture, very poetic and minimalistic, very sensual work. Then Tommaso Caha, an Italian photographer that now lives in Paris, but does lots of street photography, very interesting works. Was in London before and talks about lots of things relating to his relationship, intimate relationship to photography and his work. Then the week after, that was Sarah Affolter, this young, the new generation of photographers, a Swiss-German photographer from the central part of Switzerland. That was an interview in Alten during the International Photo Festival Alten, and it's in English, obviously. And finally, Peter Colson, this famous portrait, fashion, and editorial photographer, where we have this dialogue from Australia using Zoom. Super interesting to hear about the reasons of his photography, the history behind all the adventures that lead to what he does today. So, yeah, that's about the podcast in plural. Then the playlists, the YouTube playlist. So, first playlist is basically Serial and MatNum. It's a dual playlist. First weeks of the months, usually I do Serial, where I talk about photographs I've taken or edited the months before. And MatNum, which is the equivalent, but for computational photography, where I talk about the photos edited and taken the months before, but using my own photographic apps and algorithms. So they're both relating to photos from the AL Photo Festival from Belgrade in Serbia. I was in central Switzerland, Laupen. I visited the mountains of Jura. There's photos from barbecues with friends, Iceland. I talk about the equipment, the films I used, the cameras, the experimental settings, and whatnot. It's kind of I tell stories about the photos I took or edited in the months before. And sometimes the photos are pretty old because if the photos I edit come from films I've recently developed or simply wanted to revisit, you get some older stuff too. Then there's the playlist AIs Hit, where we talk about famous photographers from the past or present using AI. We ask AI about those photographers and then ask it to illustrate. And here I use ChatGPT, Dall-E and Midjourney. And the photographers we've listened and looked at were first week Jan Sadek, this Czech photographer with a very specific style that had a studio in his basement. Then Martin Frank, historian, half Belgian, half British, that also developed then a very specific style, very interesting profile in photography. Again, the Czech photographer the week after was Karel Teige, with his collages of body parts and objects, this modernist photographer. And finally, the last AI's hit for the month was Leni Riefenstahl, this German actress that became director and photographer, revolutionized sport photography, but with a very controversial past as the propaganda photographer for the Third Reich, basically for Hitler. So, those 4 episodes, you can go check them. All the playlists are usually in French and English and have the same content. So if you speak French, you can go check the French versions. And finally, Von Cam, the last specific playlist, which is actually focused on equipment. And here are 3 episodes. The first was adapting Leica M-mount lenses to Micro Four Thirds camera. Does it make sense? My idea was basically if you want to invest into nicer, I would say, lenses for the M-mount, if you like rangefinder cameras, you might want to start with a cheaper body and invest into the nice lenses. How does it render? Does it work? Knowing that MFT is basically doubling the focus, the focusing range of your lens, 50 millimeter becoming 100 millimeter. Anyways, I talk about that, and we look at results using basically Leica lenses. The week after, I talked about the Contax T, the small pocketable rangefinder camera, quite legendary from the 80s. With its almost all titanium body. The first of the Contax T family, the non-autofocus one. A really great camera, but I go through its use and the results. And finally, a week with the TT Artisan Tilt 50mm f1.4 lens. I've tested it for many months all around the world. And yeah, I talk about it and how I think it's actually a very interesting, and even more when you look at the price, very interesting 50mm lens to traditional and more experimental photography. Results viewed into episodes. So here, that's basically all the playlists. As for other projects, basically Project Podcast, I haven't really advanced on that front. I'm still trying to finish this film, and the camera I usually don't use. It's a first try, trying to find inspiration by using equipment I don't usually use. So using an Hasselblad 500 cm camera with Metropolis film from lomography. Not yet anywhere, but it's slowly advancing. That's the goal of this project on inspiration for the podcast. And then otherwise, the month was filled with a new series I'm trying to integrate. It's a try. I'm not sure it's going to work out, but I already have 3 episodes, the media for the 3 episodes, where I talk more about on-the-field photography, landscape, or travel photography. I want to see if this is feasible on a regular manner. So I've filmed basically 3 episodes, and I'm going to have to edit them, but they should come up soon, and that was some part of the previous months, but I can't really talk about it. It's something that will have to be seen. Anyways, hopefully you will also interact, because it's also the occasion, if you have ideas, you want me to look at some kind of equipment, want me to talk about, I've tested so many cameras or equipment that I might have some stuff on my hard drive, and I could actually talk about it sooner than expected if you're interested. So don't hesitate to interact below, or ask questions, or propose other ideas, and also interact on the voice answering machine for the podcast. So here it is, and catch you next week.